Welcome, I'm Bruce Frantzis, and I'm the founder of Energy Arts, and this is part of a short video series that's going to introduce our next training circle program. I created this program for a number of reasons. First of all, because it's not in the West, the old Yang Style of Tai Chi, the knowledge of that earlier generation, which was so venerated in China, is in great danger of dying out. So I feel it's just an important thing for benefit to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that this information is out, so that people who do Tai Chi, especially the Yang style, can see what it is and can start, let's just say, upping their game. The second reason is that I think that if these principles that are in here, as they get better known, it's going to be able to truly help a lot of people's bodies and health. And if these principles, and even in the most minor way, start going into the Tai Chi that older people do, I think it can really help the aging population. A lot of the Tai Chi that is coming out, that is supposed to be for senior Tai Chi or older people Tai Chi, is what I would call the lowest common denominator. It's like if you're going to say mathematics, okay, we'll do add, subtraction, multiply, and divide, and forget the rest of it. Well, a lot of value comes from the rest of it. So I believe if the information is out there and people can see what it is, I believe it will help us as we're aging, but more than that, the next generation of people who are going to be aging. As well as I think it's also just, since I had the opportunity in all the years I was in China to spend years learning this stuff, I'm kind of a bridge. I'm a bridge between East and West. I don't have language barriers. I learned all this stuff in Chinese. I'm dead fluent in Chinese. So I actually knew what was being taught. I understood it. I wasn't just watching it and getting a few words and hoping I picked up the gist of it. But I actually learned it the same way if you went to a university, you'd learn a subject. So I think that now that I'm a little bit older, I'm a senior citizen now myself. I passed my 65th birthday, been doing Tai Chi for 50 years. I think that something that happens, and I think is a bit of a responsibility, I believe it's a responsibility, it's a good thing, if the older generation mentors the younger generations. In my particular case, I'm now of the age where I am the master, because almost all the people I learned with are dead. And that knowledge was passed down, and it's only the people who got that knowledge that can pass it on while they're still living and vibrant. And as you'll see from these, I'm pretty alive and I'm pretty vibrant. So while I still have that capacity, this is my last opportunity to provide whatever benefit from Tai Chi can be done. I would like, I'm not going to go as far as some people, Tai Chi can heal the world, because I don't know if anything can heal the world, but I do believe it can seriously heal an immense number of people. When Tai Chi was at its height in China, there were 200 million people doing it every day. And the biggest reason, the overwhelming majority of them did it, was because it had such a powerful, realistic effect on their longevity, and it had such a powerful, realistic effect on healing illnesses. And I think that just these two things, for having been a martial artist my whole life, I think that showing that there's a whole nother way of dealing with martial arts except tensing your body and getting angry, I think is a good thing, just to let that model be out there so people realize that they can be effective in martial arts without having going emotionally crazy behind it. And having grown up in the karate world and having done a lot of full contact, I'm just familiar with so many people who are, frankly speaking, get a little bit emotionally over the top in what they do. And that's okay if you do it in the ring. It's not so great when you take it home to your family and your friends. So I think Tai Chi offers a contrast to that about how you can be effective without, and at the same time, chill out your emotions. As many of you know, I'm a bit of a dinosaur and I've been doing Tai Chi for 50 years. But this is kind of the Chinese way of thinking about it, which actually is not in many ways that different from a Western way of thinking about it. When you want to know, should I study with a professor or should I take the works of X, Y, and Z person seriously? Well, you want to know their educational backgrounds, you want to know something about their accomplishments. But the point that's being made here, and they do the same thing in China, they ask who your teachers were. In the same way that in the West someone would say, what university did you graduate from? What graduate program did you graduate from? What specials did you do? What special attachments did you do in some special subject? Okay, so I'm just going to try and give you an idea. Before I ever did Tai Chi, I already had black belts in a few martial arts. So I started learning Tai Chi because I was interested in martial arts. I didn't come to it because I was sick and I wanted to get healthy. As a matter of fact, I only really started because someone did this little dinky punch that was a half an inch and they dropped me right to the floor and I said, hey, I want to learn that, okay? That's how it started. That's where it came from. I realize you'd like to hear some great spiritual story, but that isn't why I did it. Okay? I was doing meditation for years before that, and I didn't equate Tai Chi with meditation either. So anyway, the first person I learned was only for a brief time was Cheng Men Ching. And that he has what in the West now is one big branch of Tai Chi. So I studied with Zheng for a while. I've written about it in The Power of Internal Martial Arts. You can always read the story. And then I also subsequently studied with some of his teachers, for some of his senior students. For example, T.T. Liang, a little bit later in the 70s. But for a lot of reasons at that time, Zheng Men Ching was not really teaching Tai Chi as martial arts, as fighting, okay? And all of his students, actually, a lot of his students had complaints about that. But he did other things. But I got at least from him how to kick better, and I used that to win a lot of karate championships, this slow motion lotus kick you do, and I just tweaked some ideas in my head. But then I got to be, I went to Japan to continue with martial arts, and I studied with the founder of Aikido and became like a karate champion, and my team won lots of things, and I did like the mega serious Japanese university karate training. And then I met this person, and he was someone I knew from New York who studied with a guy called Wang Shujing, and I met this guy in Roppongi at a coffee shop and got to know him, and he said, okay, look, if you want to go to Taiwan, you go visit Wang and you give him a nice gift and we see what happens. And this guy was rather serious, and I went and I didn't study Tai Chi, I studied Bagua for a summer with him. But then when I came back to Tokyo, I found out one of his senior students, Jiang Yijun, was teaching in Tokyo. And he was teaching the Chen Pan Ling form of Tai Chi, which is a combination form of Tai Chi. When Chen Pan Ling himself was an engineer, so he had that kind of very precise mind, and his father was a fairly wealthy person. He used to bring like all these top martial art people to come and teach his son and show up in his house. And he had studied in the Chen village, and he had studied with members of the Yang family. But just before World War II, there was a national martial arts program, and he developed with a bunch of other people, kind of a committee, a form that if the Japanese were to totally wipe out China, at least they would have something that really cataloged all the major methods and techniques. Leaving outside whether they did it or not, it was a very good combination form, and that intrigued me into learning all the pieces that went into it. And I then spent the next 20 years until I did get all the pieces and learn the styles it came from. So I saw Tai Chi as a whole rather than just this style or this subdivision. This goes on, and I even brought a Yang Style teacher to be in my house from Taiwan when I was in college, and he stayed there a few months, and I learned, quote unquote, the secrets of Tai Chi, which I later on found out were half Tai Chi and half were White Crane. But, you know, who knew it those days? All you did was keep on getting these big stories about things, and you never really knew the truth. Then, during the 1970s, I continued to study Tai Chi, and I did it also with Yang Shaozhong, who was the son of Yang, the oldest son of Yang Chengfu, which is kind of what the whole new Yang style comes from. I studied with him in Hong Kong. I studied with other Yang style people who were in Taiwan, most of whom you probably don't know their names. And, you know, did the whole thing. Did the form, the long form, the pushing hands, the fighting, you know, some weapons, this and this and that, all the way into where we were using it for sparring and all that kind of stuff. This then continued, and by the end of the 1970s, I had a very strong background in Yang Tai Chi, because I was doing with Yang Shaozhong between the years basically of about 77 and 79. Then I came back to America for a while, and I went back to mainland China for a bit. And during this time, I became the first American who got certified in the Chinese government's national form of Tai Chi, the 24, the push hands, the sword, the spear, all that stuff, which I have to say, to me, is what they call Wushu Tai Chi, which is not the highest level of Tai Chi that's out there, because the traditional stuff is. But that was the form that the mainland did to try and spread Tai Chi to the masses. And a lot of the 200 million people who were doing Tai Chi in China at that time, that's the form they did. So anyway, I now become certified that I can teach Tai Chi anywhere in China. During that period of time, I met Liu Hongjie, and I spent a summer. I would go from the Physical Education Institute, I would take a taxi into the city, do the Tai Chi stuff with them in the morning, do Bagua and Xingyi with him in the afternoon. And this, again, goes on for a couple of months. And in the last about month or 6 weeks, I just stayed inside the city and saw Liu twice a day. Now, who was Liu Hongjie? He was a major lineage holder in Xingyi and Bagua. He began when he was 12. He was the last entry into the original Bagua school in Beijing. He was the youngest member. He was there for a couple of years until the thing closed down. And then he studied with a lot of the most senior teachers who were there at that time. And I'm not making this about Bagua, that was it. Then what happens is that Liu Hongjie, during the period, before the Communist Revolution, in the mid-30s, he goes and teaches in, they had a thing in China called martial art institutes. There was a central government one, and then there were the regional ones. And the strongest of the regional ones was in the same place that the Chen village is. It was in Hunan province. He was the head of the instructors. For example, Zheng Manqing held a vice presidential post in that. But he didn't hold it because of ability, he held it because he came from the same town as Chiang Kai-shek. And so there was political reasons. But Liu was in there strictly because of how he performed in that competition and the fact that he had such a big reputation in Beijing. So he was there purely on competence, where he was the one who was in charge of training all the martial art people at Institute. At that time, the Hunan was considered to be the strongest of all the, what they call wushu guans around China. He then, when he's there, he meets the two sons of Wu Jianquan. Now, if you go from Tai Chi, the original Yang, he had a best student called Chuanyo. Yang's two kids, plus Chuanyo, Wu's father, teach Wu. And it's about as direct a Tai Chi descension from the original Yang as you're going to get. Okay? I mean, I saw pictures in Liu where, for example, the kid, their children were like sitting on his knee. So he was kind of like, a grandpa or a granduncle or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, they then are sending letters back to their father saying, this guy's really great, really great, really great. And Liu then goes and lives in Wu Jianquan's house for 6 months, and he actually writes the book, Wu Jianquan's book about his Tai Chi, because Wu Jianquan came from that older generation. He couldn't really write, and Liu had once upon a time been a professor in Tsinghua University, one of the major universities in Beijing in classical Chinese studies, so he could write very well. So that's Liu, and I meet him. But I don't do Tai Chi with him. I'm doing Xingyi and Bagua, because that's what I kept asking for. I wasn't asking about Tai Chi. Tai Chi teachers were a lot easier to find those days than really good Bagua teachers. Bagua teachers were much rarer and much harder to find. And many in China consider to be Bagua a higher art than Tai Chi is. But same family, but different branch. And then from Baiwa, I start learning the old Yang style. And then we go to Xiamen, where Lin Duying is, and I train with him, and he made me a lineage holder. And Baiwa did a great job of getting me up to snuff, and Lin Duying just, made it really, really great. And he said that I was good enough to be in the lineage chart. So I became a formal disciple in the old Yang style. And then after this point, I've learned this from Lin Duying. I learned the Wu style from Liu, and I came back to the West and I taught. Now, during this time in Beijing, because the Chen Pan Ling style also had a lot of elements of the original Chen style, I studied the Chen style with Feng Zhichang. And there was a time in Beijing where Feng Zhichang wanted to make me his formal disciple, but because I was with Liu Hongjie, that couldn't work out. You do not have two masters in the same place and become their formal disciples. But Feng thought I was good enough for that. And for example, when I went back to Beijing after, not having seen him for more than 10 years, he had my picture. His daughter was surprised. My picture was right in his living room. We had a very, affectionate, good relationship, and Feng always thought, I did the Chen style reasonably well. But after all of this, I came back, I taught the Wu style, taught the Yang style a little bit in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but people found it too difficult, and so I said, no, I'm going to teach the Wu style because I considered that the meditation part of it was valuable, and also because the Wu style was so much better for lower backs. And since America had so many lower back problems, I just figured, okay, I'm going to go this way. But after being asked for 25 years if I would teach the old Yang style by many, many Yang practitioners, I can think of hundreds, if not 1,000, who've asked me to my face, would you do this? I finally come now that I'm a little bit older and I'm just passing 65, and I said, okay, I'm now going to put this out. So I spent my entire youth and, my youthful young manhood, whatever you want to call it, beginning to move into middle age, studying Tai Chi the same way that someone in a very high-class university really bores into their subject. So anyway, that's what I've done, and I hope you find this rendition of the Yang style good, no matter what style of Tai Chi you do, and I do believe that Yang style practitioners will gain an immense amount out of it, just as I am absolutely positive that people who do the Wu style of Tai Chi, you've done it with me, you will sometimes, by looking from a different angle, you see things, and I'm sure they will immensely benefit from understanding how this old Yang style works. If you learn Tai Chi, and it doesn't matter with what teacher, and it doesn't matter where, and it doesn't matter which particular branch of the Yang system, you're going to learn it in stages. Now, different systems will teach things in different orders, or they'll do the stage, but I'll say what I will be doing in the program, in this training circle, because it is pretty much the way it was done classically in Tai Chi. Okay, we're going back to how Tai Chi was originally done and what allowed it to become so famous. Now, the first thing is the first stage is going to be learning the physical movements and the basic body alignments that go with it. Okay? The second stage is going to be the foundation energetics of it. So in one level, I'll talk about Peng Liu Jian in a few minutes, but it's all this stuff you're doing internally. For example, you have an alignment, external alignment. Oh, your elbows here, your shoulders here, your bodies and knees. There are certain relationships between different body parts, but you have internal alignments. You talk about the way your channels connect inside your body, all of which is physically invisible to sight observation. Then you go to the next stage. You go to intermediate energetics. Now you're going to be going into pretty much everything that's included in Yang Cheng Fu's 10 principles. You're going to be going into what's called the 16 Neigong, which are the 16 components that every Qi method in China is composed of. It all originally comes from Taoism, and they call it the 16 Neigong, okay? And you're going to be learning them one at a time, and then you're going to be putting them back into your form, you're going to be putting them back into your foundation energetics, but they're going to go all over the place. The next thing is that you're going to be focusing on application tracks. So all the things I've talked about so far are general. Then when you want to specify them, then you have to look at, well, are you specifying these energetics and these alignments, et cetera, et cetera? Are you doing it for martial arts to develop kind of power in your body? Are you doing it to heal disease? What kind of disease is going to determine how you use the energetics, not just one thing cures all. And then you're talking about, to varying degrees, how these same applications are done in meditation for making your mind and your spirit much, much cleaner, and releasing the deeper stresses in you that are not just caused by physical stress, but are caused by much deeper emotional, psychological, and karmic issues inside you. If this were 100 years ago, and you were to go to some backwoods place and show them a laptop computer, they would think it was a box. Most people who look at Tai Chi, they think it's some movements, and they think that's all it is. Or some people have the perception of seeing something else is going on, but they can't figure out what's going on. Well, just like you have chips in a computer and programs, blah, 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 you have energies, the way energy or chi is moving in your body, that's central to how Tai Chi works and what it can do. Just like chips in a computer are central for what that computer can do. And there's different kinds of chips, or at least different circuit boards within different chips, that allow the computer to do what it can do. Now, there's 4, but in reality, the way they explained it in the old days, and the classics are the set of books that explain all the, shall we say, theoretical principles of Tai Chi. They talk about 13 energies, they don't talk about 4. But the first 4 are ward off, roll back, press forward, push downward, or Peng Lu Jian. And then, as it goes, this is going to be in every move, no matter what a movement is in a form, you're actually going to be projecting these energies off of your body. Okay? Now, when you're learning just movements, you don't do that. You know, you could say, oh, well, you know, Peng, for example, is energy expanding, but it could expand up or down or this or that way. And so, oh, you see a hand movement going up, you see a movement, but you don't see what invisibly is happening in that person. And these 4 energies are very important in terms of your body because they move blood. Peng, for example, expands blood vessels. An closes them down, compresses them. Ji makes blood go from the heart to the extremities. Liu makes blood go from the extremities to the heart. And you can get a good Tai Chi person, they'll stand still and you can actually track the way their blood's going to move in their body. So we have this. It goes then further, the Peng Lu Jian, the way they combine with each other, you know, one with one, it then becomes Sai Lia Jiu Kao, or split, pull down, shoulder, elbow. And I'm not going to go to how this technically works, but you're combining. You're combining Peng, you know, 2 of the 4 combine together, and that's how you get each one. And how they combine together to also work with your shoulder and the way they work with your elbow. Because every movement of your arm in some way is going to use your shoulder and your elbow. But that's a technical subject. Just understand what it is. And the last of the 13 postures, when they talk about what is Tai Chi, they don't say Tai Chi is movements. They say Tai Chi is 13 postures. And that's the way that you move. Forward, back, left, right, and being in the center. Now, the thing about Peng, to make it very simple, the old Yang style really emphasizes how Peng Lu Jian An works in every single movement in the form. It's not just that when you do pushing hands, you do the movement Peng Lu Jian, because that's the movement of it. It's actually how you actually manifest it off of your body. Peng is expansion. The classic phrase is it's the force in water that causes a boat to float or a log to float. But that expansion can happen in any direction. Liu is absorption of energy. It's absorption of energy into you. Okay, and that's done a lot of different ways. Ji is 2 Pengs that come together to cause between them a triangulation to cause a straight line. Even if one hand's like this and I'm back here, I make this hand connect to this one and boom, something comes out of that hand. So Ji is like a gun going out. The bullet goes out. It goes out straight, and it doesn't matter if you point the gun up, down, this way or that way. The bullet only goes straight. And An is pushing downwards, something that is literally pushing, like you're pushing toward the center of the earth. It doesn't matter if you push downward with your hands going forward or you push with your hands going backward. It's the down part that's the big deal. In the next video, I'm going to share with you one of the internal aspects of Neigong that's called opening and closing. Or as the person who was my instructor in the Physical Education Institute in Beijing, what he said, without openings and closings, there is no Tai Chi. So opening and closing in many ways is the primary yin-yang technique within Tai Chi. Thank you very much. So that's my story, and as I think should be very obvious from what I've said, you know, this is the real deal. This is not the watered down version. This is about as straight as it's going to get. And I just want you to understand, this is coming from a very pure stream. And whatever's the water is in there, that's what will quench your thirst.